We're joined in the studio just before you go, Shakir. I'd be interested to get Stella's view on this. I know Stella Perrett, who's just arrived in the studio, shaking hands with Shakir now. Stella, you're part of a group which is campaigning in the general election. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's nice to meet you, and nice to be back here again. Haven't been here for ages. So, yeah, I've been involved with getting women's rights candidates onto the ballot around the country and also here in Bristol. And right up to the last minute when nominations closed this afternoon at 4 o'clock, we were still waiting with bated breath to see if our candidates had got through.
So give us an idea of what is it a specific party? Are these independent candidates?
Yeah, a brand new party was set up just before the local elections. In fact, it was only registered by the Electoral Commission in sort of April, and it's called Party of Women. We managed to get a handful of candidates in the local elections, up more in the northern seats, actually, which is the first time any completely pro-women's party has raised candidates for elections in this country. And we see it very much, it's obviously a protest party, it's obviously a one issue almost, except that we feel that women's rights is in every area of life. Education and child safeguarding and all the rest of it. So we hope that the party will be a legitimate platform for women to be able to speak these views in public.
Yeah, good. And I'm hoping that you and Martin are now going to have an enormous argument about what this election is all about. Because Martin wants it to be all about Gaza.
No, I'm sure he doesn't want it to be all about Gaza. I mean, we are in Britain.
Well, that's what you just said, isn't it? You want to make this...
yes, there are a few other issues.
You want to make it the pivotal point of the election. So what...
I would like to draw your attention to Ashley Ward, which is where we're sitting, actually. And Ashley Ward, the Green Party in Ashley Ward, 2 weeks before the general election, ditched their sitting councillor, a middle-aged lady called Jude English, because she had stuck up for women's rights. So the lady who's standing in Bristol Central, Carla, who's their leader, she sent to Carla a thing called the Green Women's Declaration, which is within the Greens, which is gender-critical women within the Greens. They've got their own declaration. She sent it off to her, and at the top of the tweet, she put, what does it take to be a leader, Carla? And does it mean representing all of Bristol's citizens? Because she's a lesbian, and so obviously they feel marginalised, right? And,
sorry, who is the
lesbians and also women and men
but
who are...
Who is, which of these two women is a lesbian in the Green Party?
The lady who's been ditched, who's been sacked by the Greens. Jude English, right. And so she declared this on Twitter and sent it off to her leader. Within 48 hours she was dropped, bearing in mind she was a sitting councillor, so she was automatically the candidate. Within 24 hours she was dropped, and of course then it was so close to the local election, where are they going to get a replacement from? So they put in her place a gentleman who we all know, who's been party hopping around Bristol for about 30 years, Mr Malik, who's the chairman of Eastern Mosque. He's been in the Greens about 5 minutes prior to that. So there we have an example here in Bristol of how the Greens are actually dropping it, and this is oppression of their own female candidates. They've done it around the country, not just here. This is only one example. And what they do, they say, right, we're suspending you. We've had some anonymous complaint. We're going to suspend you, but we can't deal with it here locally. We have to send the complaint up to our national party, and that we know women who've been waiting nearly 2 years to have so-called complaints dealt with.
Okay, so let's just look, Shakir, before we say goodbye to you, this is an important issue for people right across the country, Gaza, but you can understand that some people will be thinking, forget that, we need to vote on our own politics, we need to sort our own country out first.
Well, maybe world actually, if run by women, might be a better place to live. Don't you think?
Well, listen, no. I don't think it makes any difference. I don't think it makes it's a nice idea. I don't think it makes any difference. This is a sort of divide and rule thing, I don't think there's really... women and men are far more similar than different. And the differences, I think, there is a big attempt through, for example, in the trans agenda, to get people against each other, to actually get people fighting each other over... trivia. A lot of this stuff is trivia, and a lot of it is to do with bullying. They say it's bullying. Is it really bullying? Is it someone feeling very upset about nothing, or about something substantial? And these are the sorts of things that the police can look into. But you have an immense amount of discussion and comment about things that are not matters for the police.
women got more rights than we have.
Have they? Is that right?
What, have they? What, really? In countries like Egypt and Jordan and
Saudi?
I've
always seen that case. How about Gaza?
Gaza even, yeah. And how many rights have they got?
You're internationalising the discussion now.
Well, it's been brought in, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway, we're going to hear now from somebody who I think most of listeners here, as well as us all in the studio, certainly finds an interesting ingredient in this general election. Probably one of the only really interesting people who's standing. That's George Galloway. So thanks ever so much for joining us, Shakir. It's fascinating.
Thank you very much.
Can you just say, by the way, you mentioned a couple of websites where you get some news about what's going on in Palestine, because obviously the BBC, when something interesting happens, like Keir Starmer explains his policy on arms to Israel, the BBC just would rather come up with a blank screen than actually transmit it.
They're on
it's Quds.
Quds News Network. They're on.
And what is Quds? What does the word mean?
Well, it's Alexa and Quds.
It's the Arabic name for mosque.
Yeah, Al Quds and.
Okay, let me just read it out. QUDS, Quds News Network. That sounds like an interesting, useful source.
Well, it is. I mean, you can follow it. They're on what's this one called? Telegram.
Oh dear.
Oh, yeah.
Telegram.
Yeah,
oh, that evil Russian system. Oh no.
Well, I mean,
at least it's not as censored as the BBC. Anyway,
you can get loads of the latest bombings from Gaza, latest news.
I hope you didn't get any of these. I mean, one of the things that was really actually annoyed me, and I get frustrated when I see these videos from Gaza, from both the Israeli side and from the Hamas side, where they've got this exciting music in the background. You think, no. It's inappropriate, totally inappropriate.
Exactly.
But apparently this is how, these things get sold to the youngsters, and, they're encouraged to back one side or the other. But anyway, look, so we're going to start actually on your topic, Stella. That is with the Greens, because they have been talking about anti-Semitism, actually their accusations of anti-Semitism of people in the Green Party. So let's have a little listen to the discussion that Laura Koonsberg, with one of the leaders of the Green Party, Adrian Ramsey, on Sunday, where she's making all sorts of making accusations about the attitude towards the Gaza conflict and certain Green candidates. So let's have a listen to that now.
There have been a number of allegations of anti-Semitic comments made by some of your people who are standing to be MPs, including one who recently promoted a conspiracy theory that Israel had conspired to allow the October the 7th attacks to take place, when more than 1,000 people were killed and many taken hostages. Should someone who stated that be allowed to stand as an MP?
No, they shouldn't, and the Green Party takes any suggestions of anti-Semitism or indeed any form of racism very seriously, and any suggestions that have been made of inappropriate comments in recent weeks are being investigated by the relevant people in the party. That has to be separate from the party leadership, is a clear message of good governance.
So will you be barring candidates then? I mean, there are at least 3 examples that have been reported on about people who want to be Green MPs, who want to be standing, saying things on social media or liking posts on social media. One of them said Israel must be eliminated, for example. Will those people be off your list?
So in the last couple of weeks, there were 3 candidates who had been selected who are no longer going forward. I understand there's a small number more who are still being looked at. And for the first time, the Green Party is planning to stand candidates right across England and Wales. That's 570 seats. You've referred to a small number of examples here. But in terms of those seats where we've got a fantastic chance of winning at this election, seats like Bristol Central, Waveney Valley, North Herefordshire, Brighton Pavilion, we plan to get at least 4 Green MPs elected to push the new government to be bolder, because rather than Labour's timid promises on public services and climate, if this new government is going to take the action that's needed, we need Green voices in Parliament to push them to take the real hope and real change that this country needs.
OK, well, of course, we don't know who that new government will be, but interesting that you're focusing your sights on Labour. But, Adrian, thank you very much indeed for coming in. It's always great to have one of the Greens with us in the studio. And there will, in time, be a full list of candidates everywhere on the BBC website.
So you can't say Israel must be eliminated, but you can say Hamas must be eliminated.
Yes, what you've got to understand is the Overton window of what you can say. The concept of the Overton window is what is respectable opinion allowed to say. Now, if you think about it, the idea that the Israelis did or didn't have full knowledge of what happened on October the 7th is actually a factual matter. It's not something which you can have an opinion about unless you know the facts of it. In Israel itself, there's lots of discussion about why the army didn't react quickly and what was going on.
Yeah, and whether the Egyptians actually gave them a warning.
Yes, and all of this stuff. But of course, in the British political system, if you want to be, this is Laura Kuenssberg acting like the Grand Inquisitor there. So these are the opinions that you're not allowed to have, as a Green or as anything. And of course the Greens are buying into that because they don't want to be unrespectable. Now, in actual fact, the idea that the Israelis had something to do with the October the 7th attack is a perfectly reasonable idea, but you can't talk about it.
So it's almost like the Green Party are chicken too.
Well, the Green Party are trying to become a mainstream political party, anyway, so they can get drawn into this game, don't they?
They're talking there about Bristol Central. This is going to be quite an important fight, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which one of your candidates is standing? Can you say something about that?
And here we are with the politics of the Middle East coming right here into the middle of Bristol with this election, clearly, because the Greens are having to answer these questions about their candidates, including Mr Malik, who was elected to the council. The same accusations were made against him, that he said these things about October the 7th. He hasn't stood for Parliament yet, but he may do in the future. So they seem to be having a purge on two fronts, don't they? They're purging candidates who say things they don't like about the Middle East situation, and they're purging their GC candidates as well.
What do you make of the two main parties and the general election? In a wider sense, where is there any point in standing in this system?
No, well, personally, I'm as old as you are, Tony, maybe even older, and we all know that this is the last country in Europe that doesn't have any form of PR, so it's always going to be uniparty. It's just going to be the Tories and Labour exchanging seats every 4 years. Always has been, always will be. The only reason the Tories have been in power for so long is because the Liberal Democrats propped them up in a coalition government. I mean, come on, be fair, So that's why we are where we are. It's always going to be the same unless we have some kind of PR.
So what's your platform you're standing on?
Well, we're standing on just women's rights and child safeguarding. These are things that women have been lost their jobs, lost their positions, been platformed over. Me myself. I was cancelled by the Morning Star back in 2020 for making a comment in a cartoon about this very issue. So, we're very well aware of this. We felt that having a political party is possibly the only way, because we now have a legal platform. So now, when we hold a rally on College Green and we get mobbed, we get mobbed by Infantifa and all their pals that they muster.
Sorry, who is this Infantifa?
Infantifa. Well, the boys and girls who are mimicking Antifa in America. We call them Infantifa over here. Okay, so they bring their sort of heavies to opposers and try and shout us down, and the police do their best to keep both sides apart, and but this time they will have a hard job, because we're now a registered political party with the Electoral Commission, and if they try to suppress our voices in the general election campaign, it's going to be a lot harder for them to get away with it.
Now, we can't quite say exactly who will be standing, because nominations literally have only just closed for this general election, but obviously the main parties in Bristol are going to be the Greens, who now have the largest. We've got the Labour and the Conservative and the Liberal Democrats, aren't they?
Yeah, and I was involved with the Liberals for many, many years, been a candidate for them and an approved parliamentary candidate back in the day. So yeah, I know the history of Bristol.
So why aren't you still
a
Lib Dem? What do they think on the issues that you're standing for?
We don't see that you can put a cigarette paper between the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, and we don't think you can put a cigarette paper between Labour and Conservative. The only way to smash first past the post, if nobody is willing to campaign for PR in any way, shape or form, the only way is to try and bust it by voting for smaller parties and independents.
Martin, you want to bust PR, don't you? And I think I quite agree. Yeah, you want to bust the system and you want PR.
Yeah, well, I think.
So how do you do it? Stella's just suggested smaller parties are the way.
Well, I think in Northern Ireland, for example, you've got elections under all sorts of systems. In this Westminster election that's coming up, that will be a first-past-the-post election. But, of course, elections to the Assembly, after a great deal of struggle and argument, had to be PR, because it was the only way to kind of get people on both sides to talk to each other. Now, what happens in that situation is that the activists on both sides, loyalist and nationalist, they know that in a first-past-the-post election, you've got to be tactical voters. Yeah, and that could involve voting for us in a situation where you've got a massive Labour majority, for example. You can safely vote for an alternative party because they're not going to lose.
To be a spoiler party.
To be a spoiler party, yes, and I think Labour are going to lose a lot of votes in their heartland areas because of that.
Well, I'm going to put something to you. I cannot understand how any former Liberal voters, former Green voters, disaffected Tory voters, who is going to vote Labour now they've said that they're happy to have nuclear weapons back on British soil?
Well, some people will because that's not the main issue for them. Yeah, I mean, and they're there anyway. It's not as if we're going to get them. We've got them. They're just not going to get rid of them. But I think what from my point of view, Stella, what makes me really angry about that is we're running the risk of having a nuclear war with Russia. David Cameron said that we're going to allow the SAS to fire Storm Shadow missiles into Russia at military targets in Russia, and the Russians said, if you do that, we're going to fire back at you. And if you then fire back at us, we're on the nuclear escalation line.
Yeah. And does anybody think that it doesn't mean American bases with their weapons back on British soil? Of course, it will come back. And this is where we were decades ago.
I know, but it's actually more dangerous now. Starmer is clearly not. I mean, he's going to be well out of his depth when he arrives there, and of course, Sunak is even further out of his depth.
Martin, when I was a child, it was the Cuban Missile Crisis was on. I was too young to remember that, but I've been through numerous of these scares. I actually feel more frightened about the possibility of World War III now than I ever have in my life.
Well, there's a very good reason for that, because it's much more likely now than it's ever been. And it's largely due to the belligerent attitude. Back in the day, Kennedy was sufficiently smart to realise that nuclear war isn't an option. And of course, if you've watched the film 13 Days in May, which is based on the tapes of him arguing with his generals are clearly mad. They're definitely prepared to have a nuclear war. And here's the elected leader is saying, no, we're not doing that. Yeah?
Well, even during the Cold War, we had policy of détente going on in Germany and all that. And so, don't you think our politicians were more sensible back in those days?
Well, they were, because we were more. What happened was, because of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, the West got into the lazy idea that we didn't have to worry about nuclear war anymore because there wasn't going to be one and we'd won anyway. And of course, in actual fact, that's not the case. History didn't end. A modern democratic state in Russia has turned out to be a threat to Western imperial power, and they instead of dealing with them in a responsible fashion, like we dealt with the communists when they were in charge, deals were done. Nuclear weapons were reduced. But what's happened is that since Russia has become democratic, all those deals that we did with the communists, we've ripped them up. I mean, what's the sense of that? And of course, people have just watched this happen. And of course, the Greens have got more and more obsessed with climate change. And you feel like saying, look, there's a nuclear war issue here.
Why are all our gas bills so high? Because of the Ukraine-Russia war.
Yes, that's right. So in other words, when they say, well, it's the economy, stupid. So when the Americans blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, was saying that was a death knell for the German economy, which is a death knell for the European economy. So that was the Americans doing that to us.
I'm sure we all feel that here we are, little people trying to get on with our lives, and all this is going on up there somewhere. There could be a nuclear war. We have no control over it whatsoever. We rely on the people we elect to try and do something sensible, and it's all failing. We can see it's all failing.
Last week I spoke to Steve Baker's parliamentary office on the phone, and I wouldn't normally do this, but I got such a bizarre reaction from the lady that spoke. I did have a bit of sound because I was a little bit suspicious about what they were going to do and what they were going to say. This is where the UK Space Command is based in High Wycombe. Actually, it turns out it's not Steve Baker's constituency. UK Space Command is somewhere else, but the Space Command is designed to look for Russian nuclear weapons if they're heading towards us. So I phoned them up, and then his researcher then phoned me back. I wanted to get either him or his neighbouring MP some sort of statement from them about the fact that so many of these, now 3 of these Russian early warning radars have been destroyed, not really by Ukraine, but by NATO. The Russians certainly don't consider it's Ukrainians destroying these nuclear ballistic missile early warning radars. In fact, anyone that was listening last week will have heard our report from Duncan Campbell talking about how serious this is becoming. He's the investigative journalist from the BBC from the 1980s who did the series Secret Society. And so here is Steve Baker's constituency researcher I was talking to about this, because I can't actually get any one of these MPs to respond. What do you think about us taking out these Russian early defence radars? And what does this mean for UK Space Command? Are they worried that some of these UK equivalents or other NATO equivalents are going to be taken out by the Russians if we take theirs out?
I rang you earlier, but unfortunately I couldn't get hold of you. Can you say, in your message, are you asking about RAF High Wycombe?
Yes. Well, I mean, I know that's where the UK's early warning defences, it's the headquarters for it. So I thought it'd be Steve who might have something to say about it.
No, because RAF High Wycombe isn't in High Wycombe. That's what I needed to tell you.
Oh, isn't it? Oh,
no. So we're not the, I mean, there are no MPs tomorrow, so you won't get MP statements anyway, because Parliament's dissolved tomorrow. So after tonight, there are no more MPs. Every MP that's currently restanding becomes a parliamentary candidate.
Right.
But if you want to speak to Rob Butler's office, so basically, RAF High Wycombe is in an area called Knaphill. It's just over the constituency border, and it comes under the Aylesbury constituency, which today is still Rob Butler MP. I won't give the London number because the London offices are all shutting down. So 01296, if you've got a pen.
Hang on a sec. All right, hang on.
Who do you work for, sorry?
Well, we have an arts centre in here. We have a weekly radio show, podcast. So what's this number? 012, I've half got it down here, 01296.
Yeah. Okay, 01296 428 972.
And that's for Rob. So what's happening with Steve then?
How do you mean?
He's standing in High Wycombe still, is he?
Yeah, he will be, yeah.
I mean, I think you should put this to him as an interview request, if you haven't done that already, because he's ex-RAF himself, and this is an RAF system, isn't it?
Unfortunately, you would probably need to speak to Rob about that, not to Steve. We can't really take MP interviews now, I'm afraid, because he just.
Well, so won't he just say the same as that?
I'm really sorry. I mean, I can just have to refer you to Rob. I have given your number to Steve, but I think I need to refer you to Rob. I'm really sorry.
All right, so he doesn't. Okay. No, you're saying he doesn't want to do it.
I'm really sorry, Mr. Gosling. I really can't tell you anymore. I'm a caseworker. I'm not here to do sound bites. I'm really sorry. Okay.
No, I'm not asking for sound bites. I'm saying, has Steve said no, he doesn't want to do it?
At which point she put the phone down. So there's me trying to find out, get some of the local MPs to give a comment about the takeout of filing Dales potentially after we take out these Russian early warning radar systems. I mean, this is, I have to do, it's interesting. I mean, the reason I played that is because I just can't get a statement out of any of these MPs about what's happening, Stella. And I think in a way, I love the fact that people like you are involved with standing alternative candidates, because these MPs, they have all this responsibility, they have all this knowledge, and yet I'm asking a simple request about what I think is quite an important matter about a potential nuclear war and defending your country, and whether your radars are going to be hit by the Russians or whether we've been hitting theirs. And that's the sort of response you get, basically nothing.
Well, I must say I feel quite sorry for that woman, because obviously she's in the position where her boss isn't there and she can't get hold of him, and they're going into
But she wouldn't even tell me if she'd actually asked Steve for an interview, which is why I phoned them. And of course I phoned the number that she gave me, Rob Butler, no answer, no reply, not even an answer phone to leave a message on. So, you know, this is me trying to do the job of finding out for the public what's going on with two MPs that clearly are quite close to the RAF and to the British defence system. And you get nothing.
Doesn't instill confidence, does it? No, that's right.
I think she had the let out there, which is that once there are no more MPs, they're parliamentary candidates. So she presumably was employed by the MP's office.
Yeah, that's tonight she was talking about. They are MPs today. And anyway, there'll be candidates tomorrow. You know, it's just the usual wriggle. Oh, we don't want to do that. Why should we? Maybe if it's the BBC and we get someone, you know, like Laura Koonsberg.
Well, I mean, you're doing a very good job of getting your foot in the door there, but you can understand part of her job is to stop you coming through that door.
No, part of her job is to make sure that the MPs are serving their constituents. That's part of her job. Anyway, you know, I just thought it'd be interesting for people to hear little conversations like that go on. I mean, generally, the system seems pretty much, with the Union Party, still broken, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the position we're taking with Party of Women is that we do not vet our candidates or supporters on what part of the political spectrum they've come from. So we do not have arguments with our people. We are standing on a single platform, basically, which is the freedom to say certain things, which I don't even know if I'm allowed to say on your radio station, but I can read them out.
Yes, you can. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we have. I mean,
unless we have to edit it out.
Our manifesto is literally four slogans long. Is
Go on, then.
Men can't be women, women can't be men, transitioning children is abuse. You know, and so these things are.
That's three.
Oh, yeah, what was the other one? I should know, shouldn't I? But those are the kind of things.
Men can't be women, women can't be men.
Yeah.
Transitioning
it's a bit
children
more, it's a bit more,
is abuse.
It's a bit
What's
more,
the third one? Fourth one?
It's a bit more specific than that. It's women can't have penises and men can't have vaginas. Yes.
Right.
Okay. So that's why it's difficult to say on public platforms. We get our candidates. We've already had a candidate who has been given an eviction notice, intimidated by her own landlord when she tried to get nominations to stand. That was up in Edinburgh. She's known these people for 12 years, thought they were her friends, asked for the signatures on the nomination paper, and the answer was, I'm evicting you and your business from my building. So that is before...
Well, that is the right of a landlord to do that,
That's before... Well... If you think so, I mean, that is before somebody even gets to stand as an MP. That's not even getting through the process. This is the sort of thing we've had to face, and I'm because of the platform we stand on, it's harder for us to get candidates than probably a lot of other smaller parties. But I would recommend voting for smaller parties. I'm not voting for either of the two big parties.
So would I. And also, of course, it sends a message, doesn't it? But I mean, Martin, when the Nazis in Nazi Germany, in the Weimar Republic, and in the build-up to the Second World War, there were loads and loads of little parties, weren't there, in Nazi Germany, and it caused a sort of chaos. Maybe the similar thing is happening in Britain now, something similar where the mainstream politics has just broken down. It's been infiltrated. It's been taken over by special interests like. I mean, I don't know if you saw that Stephen Hester thing again yesterday. This guy who's got a massive contract with the National Health Service to do patient records, and he's calling for Diane Abbott to be shot. He is now the biggest donor to the Conservative Party, and the Conservatives took another £5 million off of him just the day after these revelations of him with this racist and intimidating, actually threats to kill an MP.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's quite a lot. I mean, we've ranged over the territory.
Well, I'm talking about the general fact that, you know, you've got the Union Party, and the whole of politics is starting to fracture, isn't it?
Well, I think the thing is that what really messed up the PR campaign was the Liberal Democrats going into coalition with the Tories, which they'd never have done. It was disastrous policy for them. They had 50-something MPs, and they ended up with 8, or less than 8. And of course, they were promised that they would get a referendum on the alternative vote, which they should have said, we're not going to do that. We want, you know, they shouldn't have gone into coalition with them at all, because they didn't have a majority. So they've had to have a minority Tory government, which wouldn't have been able to do anything. See, if in a broken system, you've got to think very carefully about what the tactics are. So when Bobby Sands stood as an MP from his prison cell, all the other nationalist candidates dropped out because it was a first-past-the-post Westminster election to make sure he was the only nationalist on the ballot. And the same thing happened on the Unionist side, where Ken McGuinness, who was a major in the UDR, all the other candidates on their side dropped out. But nevertheless, when it comes to elections to the Assembly, you can vote for minor parties because it's not a wasted vote. The thing about having PR is no vote is wasted. Yeah.
I think the argument people always make about PR is that you end up with multi-party coalitions. Now, the advantage of that is that nobody gets to be top dog, but the disadvantage is nobody gets to be a rebel. So you have a party coming up that think they're the great rebels, they're reform at the moment. Oh, we're the great rebels and we're going to smash this. They won't even get to the stage where they have enough. Even if they get 30% in the popular opinion poll, they're unlikely to get any seats. We've seen that with the Liberals in the past. We've seen that with back in the days of the SDP Liberal Alliance. They were smashing it up to 30%. They didn't get any MPs.
So you sound to me like a single issue party, are you?
We are, ultimately, yes, but our candidates can also speak on all the subjects that people bring up, because when it comes to things like education and health service and
What about the price of food in the supermarket?
Well, yeah, all right, okay, this isn't Women's Hour, but, we are standing on, you wanted me to read out the fourth one. The fourth one was, there's no such thing as non-binary, by the way. So
what does that mean?
A lot of people don't think they're men or women, and so they call themselves non-binary. So we just say there's no such thing as non-binary. But these sound like fairly simple, basic slogans, but this is why our candidates have got a much more difficult time being public, going public, finding people to support them. And we want to try and...
But I mean, surely if people are going to vote for you, what they're thinking is your party, what's it called?
Party of Women.
The Party of Women. Going to bring down the price of food in the supermarkets?
No, they will vote for us as a protest vote, just like they might be voting for reform as a protest vote.
There's something going on, Martin, isn't it, where people are just voting against things. There's nothing really that they're voting for.
Well, that's one of the things about a first-past-the-post election. You've got to vote against what you don't want, rather than necessarily voting for what you do want. Although there's always going to be a legitimate place for protest parties, because you don't necessarily want to have a big vote. You just want this issue in the public domain.
I mean, it seems to me all of the parties, including these sort of new fringe parties like the Greens, for example, have such can I call it toxic policies? Meat and dairy rationing is one of them, apparently. Now, I'm not sure they've even, like most of the other parties, have got round to issuing a formal manifesto. But this is the Green co-leader, Adrian Ramsey, speaking on Laura Koonsberg this week. And she was saying to him, well, hang on, you've got this policy which is about dairy and meat rationing. Do you think people are going to vote for that?
Your policy document also says the population of the UK is consuming more than its fair share. And you cite food and farming, as most people would agree, as big sources of harmful emissions. And your document then says the Green Party will use rationing to reduce the amounts of meat and dairy consumed in the UK. So how much less milk would you want people to drink? And should people watching at home put down their bacon sandwiches right now?
Well, we haven't yet produced our manifesto for the next 5 years, and when we put that out in the next...
But this is in your policy platform. It's available on the website. We've looked at it carefully. It says the Green Party will therefore use rationing to reduce the amounts of meat and dairy food.
I don't think rationing is going to be in our manifesto for the next 5 years. In fact, I'm certain it's not going to be. What we're going to be putting forward is how we make our food system more resilient. And we're living at a time when we see food prices and fuel prices going up and up. We're really in a vulnerable situation in the UK because we're not producing anywhere near enough of our food at home. And the farmers I speak to in Suffolk and Norfolk all the time say to me that there's far more that the government could be doing to support our farmers, to produce far more of our food locally, to improve the grants that are available for nature-friendly farming, where farmers tell me that there's nowhere near enough money in that pot. It's too difficult to access. So if we work with our farmers, we can produce far more of our food locally. We'll be far more resilient to a changing climate, to international political affairs, which, as we've seen with the war in Ukraine, can shoot these prices up. And so Greens are alone in recognising we need a far more resilient approach to farming, to energy, to the way we run our economy. And that's the vision we're setting out.
And you have candidates standing around the country on that platform.
So that's his name is Adrian Ramsey. He's on Laura Koonsberg on Sunday from the Greens. Talk about rationing meat and dairy. Martin, you actually on this show over the years have talked about, oh yes, rationing is coming, it's coming. The Green Party apparently agree with you, and one of the things that he didn't really answer there was that one of the reasons the farmers are protesting is because it's green policies that are meaning that they have to take land out of production, and so they're therefore even less able to afford to run their farms. And they're also facing the price fixing by supermarkets who aren't paying them anywhere near enough for the produce. So, meat and dairy rationing?
Well, I mean, what Laura Kuenssberg is doing there is they've gone through the Green Party's, voluminous public discussions about this. She picks up on this one thing.
It's not a discussion, it's a policy document.
Yes, it's a policy document, but it hasn't been adopted yet. They're still discussing it, yeah? That's the whole point about a policy document. It's something we're talking about. Now, in actual fact, what may happen if we go to war with Russia is there's going to be rationing anyway. Not to do anything with Greens or anything to do with that. It's just because they're going to, like happened in World War II, they're going to be hitting ships bringing food in. Yeah? Just as we're going to be hitting their ships bringing food into Russia, except they don't have to bother about that because they've got loads of railways. The thing is, people say there is a massive crisis facing us, and it's not just a climate crisis. There's going to be a banking collapse. Lots of countries in the developing world are going to go...
You keep saying this.
When it happens, you will know it.
You've been saying it for 15 years.
Yes. It only happens once, Tony. And when it happens, it happens.
They get bailed out.
No, they don't necessarily get bailed out because you can only do that once.
Well, they haven't. They've done it several times.
Oh, yeah, but
they did it in 2019, yeah, just before COVID, and they did it in 2008.
They're now reaching a position where if they try to raise interest rates to control inflation, the banks collapse.
Who is
so
they can't.
The economic people, the people who run the economy, that is to say the central bankers and the bankers.
The City of London.
Yes, that's right.
Will not bail themselves out this time.
Well, they're not. You can do, there's things you can do, and they've done them, but you eventually run out of road. And they've run out of road, not least because they didn't win the war in Russia, which they expected to win quickly, and then they were going to take over all the wealth in Siberia. But that's not going to happen. So, Stella, but they priced that in, and they're not going to get it.
Do you feel like you just had no one to vote for? So the idea is, look, we're just going to have some of our own candidates here.
Well, absolutely. I think a lot of us do feel disenfranchised. I come from the far left. Back in the day I would have called myself a communist. I didn't approve of communists saying don't bother voting, though. I think we should still vote, but I would have called myself a communist back in the day. I still call myself a pragmatic communist. If there was such a thing as a communist government in the Western world, I would be supporting it. However, there isn't anybody in the Uni Party that I feel I can vote for. No. So I'm looking at the smaller parties. Now, if Party of Women were not actually standing in Bristol, I would probably vote for the Trade Union Socialist Party. I haven't. I'm far left.
You're not keen on George Galloway, then?
I'm not sure. I don't know if he's standing in Bristol Central.
I think they will be standing in Bristol. Like I say, we're at the point now where we just simply don't know who's going to be standing where. Tomorrow we will. There will the various electoral commissioner, I guess it is, will announce these are the candidates, people that have got their deposit in and got their signatures. But anyway, George Galloway is most definitely going to be standing some candidates in the southwest, probably at least one in Bristol. So let's have a listen to it. He actually did launch his campaign and their manifesto this week, and he had a lot to say about what he thinks is the beginning of the end of Keir Starmer. What he's talking about here, or at least he starts off by talking about, is Starmer's performance as and maybe we can hear from you two before we hear from George Galloway. He's absolutely convinced that Starmer can't think on his feet, Martin.
Well, I think compared to George Galloway, that's probably the case, because George Galloway is very much a kind of, street fighter. He doesn't need notes. He knows what his mind is. He can be buttonholed by aggressive journalists, and he just choose them to bits.
Yeah, and he says things like,
"Do
you support the Prime Minister? I despise the Prime Minister." He comes out with these fantastic sound bites.
But he does it without notes. It's all there.
Yeah. Starmer speaks from the heart. He's like a rock star that never sold out.
Yeah, well, Starmer is very wooden in the way he talks. But of course, the pitch he's making is, I am not the crazy Tories over there who are having a nervous breakdown and don't know what, to tie their own shoelaces. Anyway, and that's actually quite a good, from his point of view, that's a reasonable thing to do.
Stella, you get the chance to hear from George first, Stella, before we hear your thoughts on him launching his campaign this week. The beginning of the end of the Starmer Labour Party. That's what he thinks is going on right now. As the campaign progresses for the general election, Starmer is going to start doing worse and worse. Actually, the polls say the opposite. But let's listen to George Galloway now.
And the public in Hackney and Stoke Newington, just like the public now in Chingford, have risen up against them. That's the start of Keir Starmer's election campaign. And I'm going to tell you something, you might not want to hear it. I see these people every day up close and personal. When it comes down to one-to-one debates, Rishi Sunak is going to knock spots off Keir Starmer. He's a much better debater. Keir Starmer's a block of wood. I saw birds trying to nest in him just the other day on the campaign trail. He's clunky. He can't think on his feet. He needs a barrister's brief in order to bore the judge to death. Well, you can't do that in a general election. You've got to be nimble. Jack, be nimble. Jack, be quick. Jack, jump over that candlestick. Keir Starmer would trip over the candlestick. In fact, he placed the candlestick down there so he could trip over it. This man is accident prone. And he's going to be found out when the general election hones in on which of these two people will be the Prime Minister. Now, some of you are thinking, well, surely we want Sunak out. Nobody wants that any more than I do, trust me. You remember his reaction when I won the by-election. He flew an RAF plane down from Lossiemouth in the dark, got out a lectern that was too big for him, because he's very, very small, trust me. He's even smaller than you think he is. He wears elevator heels. I used to think that was a kind of Hollywood thing. But he literally has elevated heels. That's how small he is. But he's still far more effective in close quarter fighting than Keir Starmer will ever be. And some of you will say, well, isn't this about the lesser of two evils? Labour, Tory, same old story, two cheeks of the same. And I say this, if you vote for the lesser of two evils, evil always wins. And nothing ever gets better. But in this case, again, some of you might not like this, I could not tell you which is the lesser of the two evils, Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak. They're both equally evil to me. And I don't know if asked to choose between this cheek or that cheek of a that I have any preference. I want to boot that hard on the 4th of July in the general election, because nothing good will come out of a Starmer victory or a Sunak victory, because they are indistinguishable on everything that matters. Whether it's the economy, whether it's society. This is Blair versus Blair, this election campaign. Sunak's a Blairite and Starmer is a Blairite. They have the same views on social, cultural and political issues. But I must move on to what the television wants me to talk about. Keir Starmer has a bigger problem even than the ginger growler herself. His biggest problem is that he has supported the worst genocidal massacre seen on earth since 1945. Seen. There have been others. Vietnam, which is where I came in, was even worse. Many times worse in quantum, but we didn't see it. Seeing is believing. There is nobody in this country who has wanted to can have avoided seeing the mass slaughter in Gaza. 2.3 million people trapped in a cage, being massacred by their jailers. And when they stand up, rise up against it, it's they who are the terrorists and not the guards who are raining down death and destruction, beheading their children, cutting the limbs off their mothers. Rivers of blood are running in Gaza, and Keir Starmer has supported it from the first day and until this day. And that is Keir Starmer's biggest problem. Because there are millions of people in this country of whom you are a mere snapshot. I make that point because most of the people in this audience are white English people. They try to tell you that the only people who care about beheaded children in Gaza are Muslims. That's a lie. All Muslims, of course, care about it. But millions of other British people care about it too.
So that's George Galloway, part of his speech. I'll put the full version of that up on our show page at thisweek.org.uk. So there are some voices out there. Stella, what do you make of George there?
George, well, he's, we all know how long he's been around. He's a showman, he's an ideologue, he's bringing the Middle Eastern politics square into, to Britain with every candidate he supports. There will be people, and there will be Labour voters as well, who will vote for his party as a sort of protest party. Whether that will happen in Bristol, I don't know. They might be more willing to prop up the Greens to try and help the Greens win the seat. George Galloway is a very interesting character. He plays both ends against the middle very often. He's got showmanship. He's charming. He's when he was in the jungle.
So what do you mean by playing both ends against the middle?
Well, for example, bringing it back to our women's rights issue, he was actually brilliant on this at the Batley and Spen by-election. He was the only candidate who stood up in the town square and talked our issues against trans ideology for the protection of his own children, and he was brilliant, and he did it on the record. How he actually squares that with the oppression of women across the Arab world is just a mystery to a lot of us. So he's clearly aiming for both sides, if you like, of an argument there. He's a showman. He's a showman, and you just heard that speech there. I mean, he could stir up people quite easily. He's very clever. He's very good at it.
What do you think of his assertion he makes earlier in that clip there, though? That in fact, he says he does refer to it there. Is that Starmer is, because he is so wooden, that the election campaign is going to expose him. We've got another one of these TV debates tonight. Again, of course, Galloway is not invited. He will not. What they've done is they've got not the top 8 parties standing candidates in the election, but the top 7 parties. Yeah. So that's just one above the number that Galloway's allowed to be in the TV debate. And I mean, it seems to me he would make a massive difference and could make an enormous impact if he was in one of these TV debates, and he would get a lot of votes from it. And that's why the BBC has shut him out this evening. But this is the trickery that the media use. So I mean, what do you make of the media is playing an enormous role here, isn't it, in saying, well, you can hear from this one, but not from this one.
The media is also suppressing certain things they don't want to say. Even George Galloway hasn't said it. Why don't he come straight out and say it? Oh, because Starmer has a Jewish wife and they all go to the synagogue every weekend. Why doesn't he come right out and say that? He hasn't said that. He just says, he's wooden. He's not a good debater against Rishi, little Rishi. This is all very, very clever.
Well, he might just decide that he doesn't want to make a religious issue of it. He'd much rather make it about the genocide rather than about the religion.
Well, that shows that he's a clever, very clever sort of orator. And I agree with you that he's a real character, and he could very well attract votes. But he's not going to attract them off Tories, is he? He's going to attract them from Labour, from Lib Dem voters, from Green voters, as a protest party.
How is this going to play out, Martin, with Reform now announcing that Nigel Farage will actually be standing, even though he said he didn't want to? He's now been convinced. In fact, maybe it's just looking at the polls that the Reform Party have realised that Richard Tice, their leader, is nowhere near as popular as Farage is amongst voters.
I tell you, we'll be very, very unhappy about Farage's decision, and that's Rishi Sunak. Because in actual fact, he's had these various policy initiatives about bringing back national service and all the rest of it in order to try and win over these Brexit voting elderly voters, because they were moving towards reform. And of course, with Farage in charge, they will split the right-wing vote in this country. Now, if you know anything about rugby league, as I do, if you split the vote like that, you're going to be trashed. Yeah, Starmer will be very happy with Farage's decision, but of course Farage could still do what he did last time and then call the whole thing off in order to try and take over the Tory party.
The point is that they're not doing that this time. They
he says he's not.
They are taking them
He
off.
says he's not.
They are taking them off.
He said that last time.
I agree with Martin. He'd definitely agree with you. Yes, that is the trick they pulled. And if you look at the way the polls are falling at the moment, they had the Reform vote and the Tory vote together. What do you get? Almost equal to Labour. So they could pull this off again. I don't think
if you put the Tory vote and Reform vote together, it's not equal to Labour.
No, but it's moving. They're moving closer, and they will move closer.
In any other country, all these parties would exist. And in Spain, they had a very, very close election between the left and the right, and the left just about pipped it. But they had to keep all of their people together, and everybody has to be included.
Anyway, apparently Farage is going to make a big impact, according to one polling expert.
If all he does is simply to ensure that support for reform is not squeezed in the next 4 weeks, that in itself will be bad news for the Conservatives. Not least because what we have to remember here, this is in a sense, for those of us who remember the election 5 years ago, this has a remarkable sense of reverse deja vu. 5 years ago, Nigel Farage announced he was pulling his Brexit Party candidates out of Conservative-held seats. And in the wake of that, support for the Brexit Party fell quite markedly, even in places where it was standing. Now he's doing the very opposite. And the problem for the Conservatives is that whatever share of the vote they get, that vote is above all going to rise most in Conservative-held seats, simply because the baseline is 0, because there wasn't a Brexit Party candidate there last time. And we can see the key message of YouGov's MRP polling. It was there in the local elections. It was there in previous MRP polling. It was there in last year's local elections. The Conservatives are losing support more heavily in places where they were previously strongest. And one of the reasons for that is indeed the fact that reform support, the rise in reform support, as compared with Brexit in 2019, is highest in Conservative-held seats.
Okay, so not quite sure who that was speaking on LBC, but the point is that it looks as if this is Stella. They're going to make an enormous dent in the Tory vote reform.
Yes, they think they are. I'm not sure whether that will happen here in Bristol, because it isn't a fight with the Tories here in Bristol. So whatever candidate they've got here may just be a paper candidate.
Yes, but the thing is, it will do in most of these constituencies. You'll flip it over to the other Uniparty, Labour. So it's not going to make much difference, really.
Yeah, I can't really see, unless he pulls off the same stroke they did with the Brexit Party. I can't really see them making much of a difference, and I'd be surprised if they even he might win Clapton, I suppose, but I don't think they'll win anything else.
The big story, I think, this week anyway, when it comes to the final piece we're going to do now on the general election, is the Conservatives, how badly they're doing, and there's some enormous predictions about just how a tiny number of MPs they're going to end up with, and that's with Rishi Sunak at the helm.
We've had 3 polls out tonight, all showing pretty substantial real gains by reform, all showing the Labour Party down a bit. Just give us your overall impression of the story they tell.
Yes, Andrew, what we're seeing is the first evidence that Nigel Farage's big decision at the beginning of this week is going to have a substantial impact on this election campaign. All 3 of these showing increases in reform from between 4 or 7%. Reform in the averages are now polling not too far away from where UKIP were in 2015. These polls do show Labour down a bit. I'm not really sure there's any evidence that that's directly related. Much of what we know from other sources of data suggests that the Conservatives are the most exposed to this reform challenge. And given how far the tide has gone out for them generally, this is a big problem. And it's particularly a big problem because in hundreds of Conservative seats, there were no Brexit Party candidates in 2019, and there will be Reform UK candidates this time. That is thousands of votes off hundreds of Conservative MPs' majorities before they lose a single vote to Labour or the Liberal Democrats. It is, in no uncertain terms, Rishi Sunak's and Isaac Levido's worst nightmare.
And it's very hard not to get overexcited or overimpressed by some of these numbers, because the Redfield and Wilton poll, for instance, which shows the Conservatives on 19 and Labour on 42 and Reform on 17, would actually give the Tory party just 40 seats in the next Parliament, behind the Liberal Democrats on 63. So the Conservatives would not even be the official opposition. Now, I kind of find that hard to believe, but maybe I'm just too conventional, too naive.
Well, I mean, it can be argued either way, and as an academic, I can argue it either way with you. On the one hand, a new party like Reform, will it really deliver this level of support at the ballot box? There's still lots of question marks about that. UKIP didn't deliver in the end on their best polling, so let's wait and see. On the other hand, if those numbers are correct, if that's what we see on election night, first past the post is brutal to any party once it falls below a certain threshold. If the Conservatives fall to 20, if they fall to 18, if they fall to 17, they lose everywhere. That's how our system works. You don't get anything for second place under our system. So you can very easily go from 360 seats to 50. Let's not forget what happened to the Canadian Conservatives in 1993, when they went from a majority in their parliament to just 2 seats. That's the kind of thing that can happen under our system if you fall far enough.
Either of you like to predict how many Tories we're going to end up with in Westminster? Certainly doesn't seem like it's going to be many.
I spoke to a long-time Labour member today. He's older than me, and he's been obviously watching politics all his life as well. He's predicting that Labour will have a majority, roughly what the Tories have got now, and that's from he's hearing that from inside the Labour Party.
Yeah. Well, I think that's quite likely. I mean, obviously the Reform splitting their vote is devastating for them on first past the post. If it was, if this was Spain, it wouldn't matter. Vox can have more far right than the popular, what's it called, the PP. But at the same time, the vote isn't split. They have to negotiate with each other, but it isn't split. But in first past the post, it's brutal, as you were saying. If you fall below a certain level, then, and of course the other thing that's happened is a bandwagon effect, where when people realise that they're going to lose, they desert them because they think, well, we might as well vote for somebody else because we're not going to win.
This is what I think makes first past the post so fascinating. I know you hate it, Martin. In fact, I do hate it too. It was interesting hearing from Jungle Bus Millie a few months ago just how much many activists in Holland despise their first past the post system they've got, and they say, we would love to have. Proportional system, that they would love to have a first past the post because it means the strong politics that where you actually vote for something and actually something might actually change, as it very rarely does apparently in Holland. Anyway, I'm going to give the final word before the break to you, Stella. What would you say? I mean, you're a tiny little party. Most people will look at you on the ballot paper and they'll say, well, what's this about? I'm going to have to vote for one of the big parties in first past the post, otherwise I waste my vote.
I think you'll find that nowadays there's a lot of people that will vote for protest parties, and a lot of our campaigning is online, YouTube and things like that, which we're not in mainstream media as much as other parties are, but then we're reaching another demographic, aren't we? So I think we have every chance of people turning to us as protests, as Reform do, as the Workers' Party do, as any of the other small parties do.
And I can remember when we had a ballot in the Journalists' Union for an editor for our magazine, the only woman candidate won, mainly because all the women voted for her.
Well, who knows what people are going to do in the privacy of the voting booth, and that is the great thing about our secret voting.
OK, Stella, Perrett, thanks very much for joining us.